Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Roseville Wrecking Ball. The Roseville Wrecking Ball.
Joshua Shrum. He is a very talented steward, very knowledgeable.
The Roseville Wrecking Ball. This is one of those podcasts where I listen to every episode. I love what he's putting out there.
The Roseville Wrecking Ball. Josh Shrum.
Parcels of Knowledge. Does a fantastic job with that podcast.
The Roseville Wrecking Ball. He is an Article 8 scholar, and thank God. We need Article 8 scholars right now.
Tune into the Parcels of Knowledge podcast while you're on the route. That's the mailman's playbook, brother.
Good evening, and welcome back to Parcels of Knowledge, that podcast dedicated to delivering knowledge to the city letter carrier with your host, the Roseville Wrecking Ball. What Wednesday is not complete without Parcels of Knowledge? It's a Wrecking Crew Wednesday. Wonderful one, in fact, is my day off. And, even better, we have an even bigger wrecking crew on our hands because we now have 13 members of this badass wrecking crew. That's right, 13 members. It went up from, I believe it was 10 last week, and now we got 13. So, hey, I appreciate it. I appreciate everything you guys have done to make sure this show is successful. And while we're at it, we're going to talk about the winners of the YouTube contest. Let's see. I think I got...
The winners of the YouTube subscriber contest is Jeff Prendergast, Enrico Malatesta, and Jacob Strouch. The winners of the YouTube subscriber contest
you hear that?
Is Jeff Prendergast, Enrico Malatesta, and Jacob Strouch.
One more time for the folks in the back.
The YouTube subscriber contest is Jeff Prendergast, Enrico Malatesta, and Jacob Strouch.
All right. So for you three individuals, you know who you are. You three individuals won the YouTube contest. It ended on March 1st. I had AI pick out the names at random, and those are the three names they picked out. I'm surprised they didn't pick out any names that weren't. There's a few YouTube names that were not regular names, but yeah, those three are the winners. Reach out to me, 586-209-1902. I need to know where to send your steward supplies to. 586-209-1902, and that should be going straight to you. Well, straight from branch 828 to you, and it's paid for by the Wrecking Crew, which I am extremely thankful to have the opportunity to improve other stewards' lives through the ability to purchase things through the money that is given to me by the Patreon. And if anybody wants to become a Patreon member, feel free to go to patreon.com/parcels of knowledge. The way I say it is, if you feel like this podcast gives you any sort of value, you're welcome to give back to it, anywhere between $1 and $50 a month. And right now we got 13 members, so as always, we're going to recognize the names of those members. So it's going to be funny once this list gets like 50 people long. It'll be a long time, but that's okay. All right, so we got Rick Steiner, E.R., Tom Perry, Philip DeGilio, Christopher Angeloff, Amy Tyvan, Ryan Ackers, Edmund DeVore, Miziel Guzman, The Great One, Jamie Gregory, Neil Beckman, and Shannon Mossbarger. Man, badass individuals. I'm lucky to have you guys within the ranks of the Wrecking Crew. Thank you so much. And, we're going to move on from there. I'm still looking for questions for Region 12 candidate Bill Kriebel. That's right, Bill Kriebel, who is running under the CLC slate. We're going to have him on just this Saturday. It's only a few days away. And, of course, we're going to have to give him some questions. So please feel free to send those questions. We don't have enough yet, man. We're going to have some more. So please send those questions my way. And we're going to have a good interview because, of course, Bill Kriebel's a great guy. He's from Region 12, and he's trying to make a change. So easy questions, hard questions, any questions, good, bad, or indifferent, send them my way. I will ask them each and every one, even the silly ones. There's no such thing as a silly one. We want to know how this guy fits into your criteria of whether or not he belongs to be the next Region 12 NBA. And if you haven't checked out his podcast yet, go check out 613. I believe that's 613. I'm sure he'll let you know when he's on my podcast on Saturday, but that is the designation for steward time, if you don't already know that. So that's a pretty clever way to name your podcast. I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, 613. Moving on, we have a request today. I had someone message me recently about my SPM episode where I mentioned that if management was doing something in particular, that I would recommend them do improper instruction grievance. And they had a good point. They asked me, what was it, an improper instruction grievance, and can you do an episode on that? And I agree. You know what? There's certain things where if you're doing this for so long, you might understand the terminology, but in fact, this terminology, I don't even know if everybody uses the same term. It's a simple way of it's a type of grievance in relation to Article 3. And, it caught me off guard because I was like, yeah, you're right. You know what? Maybe I should explain exactly what that is and have an episode on that. And it's not going to be a crazy long episode. So let's talk about Article 3. Article 3 is something that technically is exclusively a right through 39 U.S. Code 1001E. I know that sounds weird because I said Article 3, not the U.S. law, but what it is our Article 3 is almost word for word taking out of the CFR of the U.S. Code, and that was created with the Postal Reorganization Act. And I'm going to read it word for word, but essentially it gives management the right to manage, which, you kind of expect it. It's kind of common sense. And it says, the employer shall have the exclusive right, subject to the provisions of this agreement and consistent with applicable laws and regulations, A, to direct employees of the employer in the performance of official duties, B, to hire, promote, transfer, assign, and retain employees in positions within the Postal Service and to suspend, demote, discharge, or take other disciplinary action against such employees. C, to maintain the efficiency of the operations entrusted to it. D, to determine the methods, means, and personnel by which operations are to be conducted. E, to prescribe a uniform dress to be worn by letter carriers and other designated employees. And F, to take whatever actions may be necessary to carry out its mission in emergency situations, i.e., an unforeseen circumstance or a combination of circumstances which calls for immediate action in a situation which is not expected to be of a reoccurring nature. That last one, item F, that is what is known as an Article 3F emergency. A lot of times management will use that to their advantage. Hey, look, there's been an emergency. This action was necessary because of the emergency situation. They'll do things like, oh, well, too many people called in. That's an emergency. That's not true. Article 3F particularly maintains that it has to be unforeseen circumstances. This type of emergency is a very slim margin of what they would define as emergencies. Typically, it doesn't actually qualify for an emergency definition under Article 3F. And a lot of times they'll try and use Article 3 to circumvent their obligations under the contract. Like, look, I have the right to manage. I have the right to manage. I have the right to do this. There is an emergency. It's important that we understand that only particular things can be understood as emergencies. Calling in is not unforeseen. Person called in. You have to prepare for not having the ability to fill that spot. It's more so for things like a tornado. That's even a bad example because a lot of times tornadoes can be predictable. But if it was an unpredictable tornado, sudden instant tornado. That would be of an unforeseen circumstance. Extreme weather, still not an emergency, because a lot of times you know the extreme weather is coming. For example, the weather will tell you that it's going to be snowing 10 inches next week and that it will be below zero. Management can't say that's an unforeseen circumstance because they have the right to, manage their employees in such a way to cover for that circumstance. It's not unforeseen because it's something that they can predict. And I just wanted to make sure to mention that. It has nothing to do with improper instruction grievances. But anytime you read Article 3, it's important to talk about that distinction with Article 3F. That's what we're talking about when we say Article 3F emergencies. But in general, the Postal Service has the exclusive right to manage. Now, the main kicker here is that it's subject to the provisions of this agreement, which is the national agreement, and consistent with applicable laws and regulations. The good news is this national agreement under Article 19 also incorporates memos and memorandums, things that involve your hours, wages, and working conditions. So, for the most part, this is going to revolve around working conditions when it comes to improper instructions. The Postal Service is a beast of they're micromanaged, very high organizational entity. They like to have everything, a book for everything, a rule for everything. And they like to do things exactly by the book, or at least that's the way it is on paper. And there was a time where this was true. Of course, management today, they got the idiots in control, so I don't even think they can handle it if they wanted to. But for the most part, they're supposed to do things by the book. And there's a reason why these books have these rules. Like, for example, there's a reason why we have particular processes in the morning for office time, because it protects our routes. It was mutually agreed to. You might think, man, why would I want to switch back to office when I forgot my accountables to get my accountable items? Well, because not only data integrity, but also accounting for your routes value when it comes to adjustments. So that being said, whenever management instructs you not to do something that is in accordance with their handbooks and manuals, that is the situation in which I define as an improper instruction grievance. So improper instruction grievance would be, for example, if we'll just use the example I already used. If I forgot to do my accountable cage, I immediately drove back to the office, went to go collect my accountables, which is an office function, and management specifically told you, no, you are instructed not to switch, and you need to go get your accountables anyway, but don't switch to the office. You need to stay on street. Well, we have data integrity rules. We have other rules that tell you where you're on street and where you're on office. So you would find those rules and file Article 3. Another example would be, I'll give you a couple more examples. Here's one example that is, it's not likely to happen, but it's just, this is an example of a particularly Article 3 improper instruction alone, because sometimes these involve safety. So let's talk about improper instruction on its own face value. That's, if you go to M39 125.1, this should be fresh in your mind because we talked about this recently. It talks about after clocking on to street time, carriers should proceed directly to their vehicles and load the mail in an orderly fashion. The very next sentence talks about when loading the vehicles, parcels must be arranged in delivery sequence where they'll be convenient to the carrier. Let's just say you're in an 1838 and the supervisor's back there with you and he tells you, wait a second, you're not loading these in delivery sequence. That's stupid. I want you to just throw them in there randomly and do the parcel feature where you can look at the next parcel and then just find it. And they're telling you it's just better just to throw the packages in, get on the street, and who cares about delivery sequence when you can just look it up when it's time to do that. And That would be an example of improper instruction, because the handbooks and manuals particularly say loading the vehicle parcels must be arranged in delivery sequence. They told you not to. That is an improper instruction because Article 3 says that management's instructions cannot be in conflict with handbooks and manuals or the contract or the law. That's in conflict with Handbook M39, which is incorporated into the contract through our Article 19. So obviously an example issue statement would be, did management violate Article 3 via Article 19 via Handbook M39 Section 125.1 in its instruction to this particular carrier on this particular day? And if so, was the appropriate remedy? Of course, all you would need is to interview the supervisor, ask them if they did the instruction. That would be the easy part if they just said yes. We also would need a statement from the carrier explaining exactly what was told to them, any proof that this instruction was given. And it's just a simple cease and desist. But sometimes things get a little bit more complicated. Like, for example, an improper instruction could also be an unsafe instruction simultaneously. For example, if management, in fact, I've seen this happen before. Management has to maintain an atmosphere of safety and make sure that their employees are safe. I had a carrier once report that the vehicle had some issues. Like, for example, the mirrors were broken. And management said, it's the only mirror that can be used to back up, right? And management said, doesn't matter, just drive it anyway. You can't guarantee that person doesn't need to back up the entire day. They could be, boxed in or anything. So that would be an improper instruction, but it would also be an unsafe instruction. It would be filed the same way, but then you would add Article 14 in there. And then you would just ask that these people follow the instructions of the handbooks and manuals in the future, that they do not give improper instructions to the carriers or even unsafe instructions to the carriers. And if it keeps happening, you can ask for training. You can ask for monetary value if it's egregious enough. But I just wanted to explain what I meant by improper instruction grievances. Hopefully that made sense to you, because it made sense to me. But like I said before, we got these blinders on sometimes because we are so involved with what we do that we forget that people who are a little bit less active in the things like filing grievances don't necessarily understand the terminology we're using or the concepts that we're using. So hopefully you learned something valuable today. And as always, you have a good day.
If these guys are getting educated, we will be in big trouble.
Management's been weighing you down like a bag of wet catalogs, but you don't gotta take it. You strap on the elbow of education, dig it?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Roseville Wrecking Ball. The Roseville Wrecking Ball.
The Roseville Wrecking Ball is an Article 8 scholar, and thank God, we need Article 8 scholars right now. The grievous genius is the Roseville Wrecking Ball, doing amazing work.
Tune into the Parcels of Knowledge podcast while you're on the route. That's the mailman's playbook, brother.